On today's episode, I'll talk about what to do with TJ Brodie and the Blackhawks blowing leads against the Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As usual, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Can do me a quick favor right off the jump by hitting that like button, jumping in the comment section down below as well to let me know your thoughts on the Blackhawks hair-pulling 4-3 overtime loss to the Carolina Hurricanes last night. Also, let me know your 2 cents on what the heck the Blackhawks should be doing with TJ Brodie, as I'll be talking about during segment 2 on today's episode. And a quick reminder as well, you can always jump to whatever part of any episode you'd like by clicking down in the description. I always have everything time-coded down in the description, and I'm sure there are some people who clicked on today's episode specifically to hear what I have to say about TJ Brodie's struggles and what the Blackhawks should be doing with him down the stretch of the season. If you are one of those people, you can easily jump to that part of the episode by clicking on the description and finding that time-coded segment. Just makes your life a lot easier than having to randomly scroll throughout the episode. Also, got to remind you all to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well. I know I've been pumping that out a lot here as of late, but I'm super close. Seriously, so close to reaching my goal of 2,000 subscribers. And again, hitting that subscribe button won't cost you anything. It's 100% free. Last but certainly not least, got to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. If you're not already a member, check out FanDuel.com right now to win $300 worth of bonus bets guaranteed if your first bet wins with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, actually, at this point in time. Thank you all again for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Frustrating 4-3 overtime loss for the Blackhawks last night to the Carolina Hurricanes, as it really felt like they had a primetime opportunity to pick up a second consecutive win against a quality opponent and also just pick up back-to-back wins in general for the first time in over a month. Instead, they wind up blowing leads of 2-0 and 3-2 as they cannot hang on down the stretch, a statement that you can probably put on the 2024-25 Chicago Blackhawks tombstone. Here lies a team that couldn't hang on down the stretch. Hawks did at least earn a point for a third consecutive game. Baby steps, at least, are being made, some progress there. But at the same point in time, this still definitely was one where the Hawks will feel like it slipped away from them. And honestly, it was a pretty similar game to what we saw on Saturday night against the Vegas Golden Knights, as the Blackhawks jumped out to a 2-goal advantage after 20 minutes. Philipp Kurashev, believe it or not, was the one to kick off the scoring as he drew back into the lineup for the first time since that painful defensive showing he had against the Detroit Red Wings. Certainly made the most of his opportunity here as he finished off a nice backdoor feed from Ryan Donato to snap a 16-game goal drought. Tyler Bertuzzi went on to double the Blackhawks lead with his team leading 17th goal of the season in his office, baby. Real savvy play by Bertuzzi, actually, to follow up on that loose puck and bank it in off of Canes goaltender Freddie Anderson, who was making his first start in a while coming back off of injury. But Bertuzzi continues to stay red hot. That now gives him 3 goals over his last 2 games and 17 points in his past 20. 17 of his 27 points on the year have now come in the past 20 games, but the second periods, they just continue to give the Blackhawks fits. The real turning point of this game, though, Blackhawks fans, came early on in the second period. Hawks were up 2-0. They get a power play opportunity. Frank Nazar gets caught with a high stick, and they have a chance to go and extend their lead to 3. But instead, the exact opposite wound up happening as they allowed a shorthanded breakaway goal from Seth Jarvis to go and cut their deficit in half, and then and it actually all started, from a turnover made by Connor Bedard when he was trying to enter the zone. And this is one of the critiques that I've talked about recently on Blackhawks Deep Dive 4.0 with Connor Bedard. I mentioned I don't think he's being fairly critiqued in a lot of areas. I think he's really only being critiqued because of the expectations of him coming into this league, and pretty much every other player on the Blackhawks deserves more criticism than Connor Bedard. But the one area where I have kind of nagged on him this year has been him trying to do too much. Now, don't get me wrong, there are nights where he certainly has to kind of try and do things himself to get this offense going, but there's a time and a place for that. And unfortunately, as a 19-year-old, he's just been making the mistake of trying to do too much at certain times when you just cannot afford to do that. This was one of those circumstances. Bedard tries to get a little too fancy entering the offensive zone, turns the puck over, leads to a breakaway goal for Seth Jarvis, completely flips the momentum of this game instead of the Blackhawks possibly extending their lead on the man advantage. The worst case scenario wound up happening is the Canes went on to score a shorthanded goal. Not a very good performance, quite honestly, out of Connor Bedard last night, but you got to remember, as a 19-year-old kid, that is going to happen from time to time, particularly against a Carolina Hurricanes team that is really well coached by Rod Brind'Amour. And you know, going into this game, Rod had Connor Bedard circled and a very good defensive bunch under his leadership over the last handful of years. Not surprised that Connor Bedard really couldn't get much going against this Canes team, as I'm sure he was the focal point of their game plan. But there was just a mistake he simply couldn't afford to make. The Canes then go on to dominate the second period and tie the game up 2-2. But just like they did on Saturday night, despite getting dominated for most of that second period, the Blackhawks managed to squeak out a goal in the final minutes of the middle frame to re-grab the lead. Heck of a play by Taylor Hall, showing off his wheels to enter the offensive zone and find Ryan Donato backdoor for his 14th goal of the season. Second point of the night for Donato. Second point of the night for Philipp Kurashev as well, which, definitely had to feel good for him in addition to the goal. It's actually his first multi-point game of the entire season. Got to think that Kurashev is going to be back on the fourth line with Taylor Hall and Ryan Donato when the Hawks are back in action next on Friday in Tampa Bay. Despite this being a losing effort, Philipp Kurashev did his job and made enough of an impact to draw back in for a second consecutive game. That put the Blackhawks ahead 3-2, but unfortunately, with under 6 minutes to go in regulation, Jordan Staal, the Canes captain, found a loose puck in between Petr Mrazek's wickets and wound up tying the game 3-3. Poor Petr Mrazek truly did all he could in the latter stages of this game to try and get the Blackhawks over the hump with a victory. He stopped 45 saves, which is the most he's made through the entire season, including a whopping 29 combined in the second and third periods. He was absolutely fantastic. Canes wound up tying it up, goes into overtime, and quickly into the 3-on-3 frame, Marty Necas sets up Sebastian Aho after a little bit of a blunder from Alex Vlasic. That winds up being the game-winning goal. Another game where the Blackhawks let one slip out of their grasp. They do earn a point for the third consecutive game, but also fall to 3-4-2 here in the month of January and 15-28-4 on the season. However, no longer dead last in the standings. They're now 31st. That position belongs to the San Jose Sharks. But there are my thoughts on the Blackhawks and what went wrong for them in their 4-3 overtime loss against the Carolina Hurricanes. Unfortunate for Connor Bedard to have a poor game that he did and kind of wind up making a turnover, leading to the turning point in the game to give Carolina all the momentum they needed to get back into it. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, as I talked about during the intro, I'll talk about TJ Brodie having yet another nightmare performance and what needs to happen with him down the stretch on the Blackhawks blue line. Real quick, though, I do need to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs more exciting because right now, new customers can start the postseason strong with $300 worth of bonus bets if you win your first bet. And FanDuel now has so many ways for you to pick up a W, and the FanDuel app is easy for you to navigate, and like I said, has a variety of bets to keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid out instantly, no waiting around for your winnings. And whether you're betting on your favorite team who's still alive in the conference championship games like the Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles, Buffalo Bills, or Washington Commanders, or even if you're just a fan of another team that's already been knocked out and just looking to add some extra excitement to the postseason. Either way, FanDuel has you covered. And to go and take advantage of this amazing offer, be sure to check out FanDuel.com right now if you're not already a member, and you can win $300 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So go and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Segment 2, I know it's been a topic of conversation a lot here on the show, but like Seth Jones last Monday against the Calgary Flames, it feels like the TJ Brodie situation has reached a boiling point here, Blackhawks fans, as he had arguably his worst performance of the entire season last night against the Carolina Hurricanes in a season full of awful ones already, as Brodie put up some of the worst defensive statistics I've legitimately ever seen, Blackhawks fans. And you're talking to a guy, I guess you're not talking, I'm the one who's talking to you, but I am a guy who's been following this very bad Chicago Blackhawks franchise for the last 4 years. And I've been very in tune with Natural Stat Trick, which is an amazing website that I always recommend if you're a big-time hockey fan and you want to learn more, particularly about, maybe a defensive defenseman or a certain defensive pairing, line combination. You can go and dive into, analytics there and see analytics from every single game from every team throughout the season. It's truly an amazing website. I always recommend it to big-time hockey fans. Natural Stat Trick, again, if you didn't catch it. I've been checking Natural Stat Trick for Blackhawks games for years and years and years. And listen, it's not like this Blackhawks team is all that different from the teams I've been watching these last few years. They've all been, regularly outpossessed, outshot attempted. They lose the battle in terms of shots on goal, right? So a lot of the analytics usually look pretty putrid for Blackhawks players over the last few seasons. But TJ Brodie last night truly put up some of the worst analytics I have ever seen. Brodie, and by the way, he only played 15 minutes and 31 seconds of time on ice at even strength. And here was the numbers. TJ Brodie was on the ice for 2 goals against at even strength. One, he was directly responsible for an absolutely awful defensive display by both he and Alec Martinez that I actually reposted from my Talkin' Hockey Twitter account. Again, reminder to go and follow at Talkin' Hockey on X so you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. But it was truly a putrid display of defense. Brodie loses the battle along the boards, loses the foot race back to the far post, easy tap and goal, ties the game up 2-2 for Carolina. Not much better from Alec Martinez, by the way. And again, it's just, there's no reason for both of them to be in the Blackhawks lineup, and we're sitting Nolan Allen or Wyatt Kaiser, as I'll get to here in just a second. But in 15 minutes and 31 seconds of time on ice last night, not only was TJ Brodie on the ice for 2 goals against, one, like I mentioned, he was directly responsible for, he was on the ice for 34 shot attempts against, which was a team high with a 7 shot attempts for to 34 against ratio. He was on the ice for 20 shots on goal against. Carolina, yeah, they had a ton. They had 48 for the game, but he was on the ice for 20 of them in 15 minutes. Again, a team high with a 3 shots on goal for to 20 shots on goal against ratio. Was on the ice for 19 scoring chances against. Again, a team high with a 3 scoring chances for to 19 against ratio and 11 high danger chances. Also a team high, 2 high danger chances for to 11 high danger chances against ratio, along with, nice little cherry on top here, Blackhawks fans, a team low 11.25 expected goals for percentage in 15 minutes and 31 seconds of time on ice. And it's not like this is coming after an injury like it was for Seth Jones, or this is just a little bit of a blip or a hiccup for TJ Brodie. No, he's been bad truthfully in like 90% of the games this year. And I would say in about 30% of them, he's been putting up numbers like this. Something has to give Blackhawks fans, because I posted again on my Talkin' Hockey X account last night, the Arthur GIF of the hockey score impact card chart following the Blackhawks loss to Carolina. TJ Brodie at the absolute bottom. He's had to have been last among all Blackhawks players on that chart, probably close to 10 times on the season now up to this point in time. And I quote tweeted it with the Arthur fist gif because I'm seriously going to scream. And you know what, Blackhawks fans? This was something that I was thinking last night. I can tolerate bad hockey. I've been tolerating it for a long, long time. You know what I can't tolerate? I can't tolerate stupidity. And playing TJ Brodie night in and night out it's pure stupidity. This isn't Sparta. This is madness to play TJ Brodie night in and night out and scratch Wyatt Kaiser and Nolan Allen. And the worst part about it, too, is, we do get Wyatt Kaiser back in the lineup. Poor guy's got to play alongside TJ Brodie, who just drags everyone down. Nolan Allen, when he's in the lineup, is usually having to play with TJ Brodie. As a rookie, he's the one who's like having to hang on back there and hold the pairing together and be the glue guy between him and TJ Brodie. And look, I mean this with all due respect, because TJ Brodie has been a successful top 4 defenseman in the league for a long, long time. I believe he averaged over 20 minutes per game in 14 consecutive years before this season, right? Like, he had been a really sound defenseman. I know Toronto Maple Leafs fans can probably come at me for his lack of solid play these last few years in particular, but he is a very respected veteran and goes about his way, in a defensive role. Block shots, plays on the penalty kill, plays against the team's best opponents. That's the role that he played for a long, long time. So, like, TJ Brodie has my respect, and I think that's something that I as someone who puts out content to an audience, I think I should definitely preface here. But man, this situation has gone too far. And Kyle Davidson, you just made a whopping mistake by signing TJ Brodie to a 2-year deal at $3.75 million. But we got to nip this mistake in the butt, because it is just becoming way too big of a problem for what TJ Brodie is supposed to be providing us as a veteran leader on the back end. He absolutely has to be scratched on Friday against the Tampa Bay Lightning. You want to preach accountability? You want to scratch Lukas Reichel? You want to scratch Wyatt Kaiser, scratch Nolan Allen? I know it was under Luke Richardson, but earlier on in the year we're scratching Taylor Hall. We've seen Philipp Kurashev have to be accountable and be scratched for like a 10-day stretch. TJ Brodie, and I know he already has been healthy scratched due to poor play, it has to happen on Friday against the Tampa Bay Lightning the next time out for the Blackhawks, because these numbers, it's worst defenseman in the NHL type of numbers. And that's just not good enough out of TJ Brodie. You have to live up to some sort of standard here, despite where the Blackhawks are and it not being a very important season anymore. Like, it's just not good enough out of TJ Brodie. And one thing I do want to point out as well, yes, the Blackhawks struggled as a team last night. They gave up 81 shot attempts at even strength. So all the analytics, most of them are going to be lopsided. But when you look at the numbers that Alex Vlasic and Louis Crevier put up with one another last night, like, they were much more sturdy than what TJ Brodie provided. Vlasic had a 9-9 shot on goal split at even strength, 8-6 scoring chance advantage with him on the ice. The Blackhawks did at even strength. They also had a 6-4 advantage in high danger chances and a 1-0 advantage in goals for. And for Louis Crevier, who spent, a good stretch of games up in the NHL now, but most of the season was an AHL defenseman, he's, handling business much cleaner than TJ Brodie has been. And I think that's the even bigger concerning part about it. Louis Crevier was on the ice for 7 shots on goal, 4-7 against last night, 7-3 scoring chance advantage, 6-1 high danger chance advantage, was on the ice for 1 goal, 4-0 against. Brodie's getting outplayed by that guy. And I know, he is playing alongside Alex Vlasic, who's the sturdiest defenseman on the team, but still, TJ Brodie, he's got to play much better than what he's been providing this team so far this season. And another thing is, Blackhawks fans, Connor Murphy, he's not quite there yet, but he is starting to get semi-close to rejoining the Blackhawks in practice. He's been skating beforehand, wearing a green non-contact jersey, when skating all alone prior to practice. So again, he's not exactly there yet, but seems like he's starting to creep back from that groin injury that currently has him landed on IR. And when he returns, that's just another body that's going to be added to the blue line. And what do you do from there? They're probably going to wind up sending Wyatt Kaiser back to the AHL, as I've guessed. And I think that's just such a shame that has to happen because we have TJ Brodie. I really do think that's a shame. As far as what the Blackhawks can do the rest of the way, they can try to trade TJ Brodie, but they're going to have to eat in order to move him. And quite honestly, I don't even know, with the way that he's been playing, if there's going to be another playoff contender that even has some interest in TJ Brodie. Yeah, everyone would like another depth defenseman, but TJ Brodie has literally been playing like an AHL defenseman this year. So I don't know if there's all that much intrigue, even if the Blackhawks were to even eat half of that. I don't think they're going to send TJ Brodie to the minors. I know he doesn't have a no movement clause or anything in his contract. They could send him to Rockford or put him on waivers to see if another team is going to claim him. Maybe that winds up being the route, but honestly, that might be likely considering just you want to be playing Louis Crevier as he's been having a good run in the NHL. You like what you've seen from Nolan Allen. I think Wyatt Kaiser should be getting NHL reps regardless. He needs reps of whatever level it's going to be at. Like, just having TJ Brodie and Alec Martinez just creates such a logjam for this Blackhawks defense. Like, they need to trade Alec Martinez as soon as possible with Connor Murphy on the brink of a return, because just from a numbers perspective and where we're at in the season, like, it's just basically about developing the young kids at this point in time. Yeah, you don't want to be losing a ton and it's going to weigh more on Connor Bedard and this young group, but it's like, we can't even really win when we want to win. So at the end of the day, it's kind of just all about development, and Martinez and Brodie are just clogging up this blue line, man. And especially when TJ Brodie is playing like this, it's an absolute disaster. I don't see much of an interest in TJ Brodie in the trade market. If the Blackhawks don't put him through waivers before the end of the year, I think they'll probably just ride it out with him. I hope they use him as the seventh defenseman more frequently, just because it's not good enough with where he's been playing. And again, with the situation they're in, it would benefit them more to play the young kids. It puts this Blackhawks team in a real predicament. It's not an easy solution as much as you like it to be. Cutting TJ Brodie, it's probably the easiest way to go about it. I don't know if Kyle Davidson wants to do that just yet, but man, with performances like that, TJ Brodie certainly isn't helping himself, certainly not helping this Blackhawks team, and it just feels like something has to give. Brodie absolutely has to be scratched on Friday when the Blackhawks take on the Tampa Bay Lightning. On the bright side, at least we got a sharp performance from Seth Jones. Final tidbit I wanted to bring up from last night's game. Jones, since that rough game against the Calgary Flames last Monday, has picked up his play as of late. He had a nice primary assist on Tyler Bertuzzi's goal to put the Blackhawks ahead 2-0. That extended his point streak to 4 games. He also led the Blackhawks with 5 shots blocked, chipped in with 4 hits in 24 minutes and 49 seconds of time on ice, and did a lot of good things in the offensive zone on the cycle. I liked his aggressiveness on the power play. The man advantage has been better for the Blackhawks as of late, so certainly the memo has been received from Seth Jones. Hopefully the memo will be received from TJ Brodie. He needs to be better, or something has to give on the Blackhawks blue line. There's everything I have from a frustrating 4-3 overtime loss to the Carolina Hurricanes last night. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, before I wrap up today's episode, still got to get into a quick prospects update. But first, I need to talk to you all about SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. And the same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's financial future secure. And SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy because, as one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. And what specifically sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. So to go and get the right life insurance for you for less, be sure to go and check out SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Again, that's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL in all caps today to go and get started. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just wanted to say thank you real quick to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, got to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast. That way you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey right now in the description, or search on YouTube and wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 3, before I wrap things up, I did want to get into a quick prospects update as I have been doing and will be doing once a week throughout the rest of the regular season. However, it is going to be a brief prospects update on the show here today because with parts 1 and 2 of my Chicago Blackhawks 2024-25 midseason prospects ranking recently dropping. Again, a reminder to go and check out parts 1 and 2 if you haven't done so already, to check out who comes in at numbers 10 through 20 at the midway point of the season as far as Blackhawks prospects go. Since I've been talking about most of the high-profile Blackhawks prospects in those first two parts, part 3, by the way, will be dropping on Thursday. I have a special episode with Charlie Roumeliotis, longtime Blackhawks beat writer, now the voice of WGN with the Blackhawks, will be joining me later this evening. We'll be having a fun chat talking about everything going down with the Chicago Blackhawks in the first half of the season. That will be dropping tomorrow. Be on the lookout for that. Part 3, the top 5 of my Chicago Blackhawks midseason prospect rankings will be dropping on Thursday. So yeah, with a lot of recent updates on those big name prospects for the Blackhawks, it's kind of the best of the rest here to round out today's episode. First, want to start with Alex Ferrand, who had a really nice month of January and is actually one of the highest producing Blackhawks prospects in terms of points so far this season. Yeah, that actually is right. It didn't sound right coming out of my mouth. But he had 9 points in 9 games in the month of January and is now up to 43 points, 15 goals, and 18 assists through his first 40 games with the Sudbury Wolves of the OHL this year. He's already set new career highs in points and assists and is well on his way to do the same with goals. Just turned 20 years old back in January on the 3rd. As a young man who has shown a nice uptick in production, got good size as well, 6'3", 195 pounds, okay wheels. I think he's done enough to get on the Blackhawks radar to potentially get an entry-level contract. One thing to consider, though, with entry-level contracts, moving forward with the Blackhawks, having such a deep prospect pool, can only sign 50 contracts in your organization. And you got to keep in mind with the prospects, you can't go over that number or put yourself in a really bad situation and have too many contracts, put yourself up against a wall. So that is one thing to keep in mind with Alex Ferrand. But I do think he's done enough to get an entry-level deal. He's got good size. Always going to be considered as a bottom 6 prospect if he ever does make it to the NHL. But again, I think he's worthy of a flyer. Ryan Green is a prospect I've recently talked about during my Blackhawks midseason prospect rankings, but I did want to mention on today's episode, he's been excellent in 2 weekends for the Terriers since returning from Christmas break. 5 goals, 3 assists, 8 points for the co-captain of BU in 4 games here in January. Now up to 23 points, 11 goals, and 12 assists through 21 games. And BU as a team, their stock is rising right now as well. They've jumped back up into the top 10 in the rankings after a couple of big weekends. Next up, we got Martin Misiak for the Blackhawks, 2023 second-round pick. 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points in 8 games in the month of January. Now up to 30 points, 12 goals, and 18 assists in 32 games. I've mentioned on the show before, I've liked the development in his playmaking and the uptick in that area of his production so far this year, that's actually been the driving point of his production. That's impressed me. Still not sure if he's ever really going to be an offensive-minded guy for the Blackhawks, but does have some good size and plays a decent two-way game. Next, we got Cole Guttman, who's quietly been phenomenal, as he always is with the Rockford Ice Hogs of the AHL, Whenever he, plays more than 30 games at that level, he's going to be pretty much a point-per-game guy. He's now up to 36 points, 18 goals, and 18 assists through 37 games this year, and he's actually going to be replacing Frank Nazar as the Ice Hogs representative at the AHL All-Star Classic here in about a month, I believe. So good to see Cole Guttman, despite everything going on down in Rockford, as I've talked about recently on the show, that hasn't slowed him down one bit. Continues to be like the leading driver of offense down there for Rockford. I expect Cole Guttman to probably get an NHL call-up right around the trade deadline, and considering there will probably be some guys coming off of this Blackhawks roster, I think there could be a spot opening up for Cole Guttman. Next, I wanted to talk about Ilya Safonov, prospect I think a lot of Blackhawks fans, not going to blame you if you have forgotten about him, as a 6th-round selection back in 2021. Now has 17 points, 6 goals, and 11 assists in 39 hiccup. 39 KHL games for Akbars. Some of you may remember him, though, when he first kind of got on our radar, when he tallied 37 points, 19 goals, and 18 assists in 64 KHL games as a 21-year-old. And I actually believe he was named captain in the second half of the season, was voted on by the team to, take over as the captain. I don't believe he's still wearing the C for Akbars. It's honestly hard to kind of track everything going down there in the KHL. But after having that 37-point explosion as a 21-year-old, kind of a disappointing production last year, only had 20 points, 13 goals, and 7 assists. Does have some really good size, though. I'll tell you what, 6'5", 225-pound center. He is 23 years old now, so starting to get up there in age, and it's always a gamble with those Russian prospects if they're going to come over. But I believe at the end of this season, that's when his contract will end with Akbars, and should he want to come over to North America, that would be the time for it. So we'll definitely keep an eye on Ilya Safonov. 2 final prospects. Tage Harding, 2021 third-round pick for the Blackhawks, 91st overall selection, is in his senior season with the Providence Friars in college hockey, has 11 points, 1 goal, and 10 assists through 22 games so far this year. Kind of like Safonov, had a real big uptick in production during his sophomore campaign, 17 points in 37 games, but then only had 8 points last year, 11 through 22 games this year. Never is going to be known for his offense as a 6'7", 240-pound left-handed defenseman, turned 23 years old back on January, so getting up there as well. I don't know if there's actually going to be room ever for Tage Harding on the Blackhawks blue line. Unfortunately for him playing college hockey, we can't see him during training camp, and now with, development camp being off ice, we don't get a lot of on-ice examples of Tage Harding or get to see a lot of footage of him a ton. But he has been a top 4 defenseman the last 2 years, been a regular staple of Providence's lineup for 4 years in a row, and they're one of the best programs in college hockey. So should the Blackhawks think he has a future, they could give him an opportunity. I'm not personally sold on it. I just don't know if there's room, but ultimately we'll end up seeing after the conclusion of his senior year. Last but certainly not least, Adam Gajan, 2023 second-round pick, 35th overall selection that year, first goaltender off the board. It has really been a struggle for Adam Gajan since the 2023 World Juniors that really got him on everyone's radar, led to him being the first goalie off the draft, out of the draft that year. He's now a freshman for the University of Minnesota Duluth. It has not been a very good season for them. Not a very good season for Gajan. He's 5-7-0 with a 3.50 goals against average and an .882 save percentage and 1 shutout in 12 games worth of action. Now again, as I preach on the show time and time again, you do not ever want to quit on a young goaltender, and Adam Gajan is still only 20 years old. He's not going to turn 21 until May. But considering what the goaltenders who were selected after him in that draft have done, it's been a very disappointing last couple of years for Adam Gajan, and yeah, you can't help but not be concerned about his future. At the end of the day, though, we're still a handful of years removed from Adam Gajan ever making that leap. He is going to be playing 4 years of college hockey, I would expect, with Minnesota Duluth, or at least at the college hockey level, should he transfer or whatever. And then, he's going to go and spend a couple of years with the Rockford Ice Hogs, should the Blackhawks. I mean, we're talking 6 to 7 years away from Adam Gajan even being NHL ready. So let's pump our tires a little bit in terms of the concern, but I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. It has not been a very good last couple of years of development out of Adam Gajan. But there is everything I have on my mini Blackhawks prospects update. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may listen to your podcast, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Tuesdays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.